Chapter 1. How could I run from what knew my name before I called it, my enemy? Whose blood was that drying on the chapel door? It was still there, crimson turned rust defiant in the morning light, long after they drove me into the desert. I'd tried once to wash it away scrubbing until my fingers bled, as if penance could be poured from a bucket. But the desert remembers what we try to forget. And so does wood if the blood runs honest. I was 17 the morning I lost my name and gained something heavier. My name is Eliza Rose Whitfield, and back then I believed if I followed the rules, kept my dresses long, and my head down, someone would love me for it. Maybe even marry me. I believed salvation came in silence and servitude. That morning began like every other, sweeping the chapel steps as Reverend Tobias practiced his sermon inside. The sun had just begun its cruel climb, turning the dusk gold and the sky pale as washed cotton. The old church bell above me, long broken, swung slightly in the warm breeze, creaking like a ghost waiting to be named. I was wearing my mother's calico dress, pale blue with tiny white flowers, modest frayed 2 sizes too large at the shoulders. My ribbon sash had faded to the color of old violets. I used to think that dress might one day be my wedding gown, that someone might look at me the way men looked at the mayor's daughters with admiration and claim. I hadn't yet learned that Broken Mesa didn't see girls like me, only what we were good for. Then the shots rang out, 3 of them, clean sharp one after the other, like punctuation on a story not yet written. Somewhere down near the blacksmith shop, then shouting, pounding hooves, dogs barking. The entire town exhaled in fear. I stood frozen, one hand on the broom, until I saw him. He came staggering between 2 buildings, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped through torn buckskin, trailing down his arm in thick drops. His chest rose and fell in panicked rhythm, his braid tangled with sweat and dust. But it was his eyes that struck me. Still cold, dark, wild, not with violence, but with pain and something unspoken. Pleading, an Apache. Everything I'd been taught screamed at me to run. Reverend Tobias said they were devils in skin. Mrs. Green called them gods cursed for the sins of Cain. Shoot first, pray later was the law of Broken Mesa. But those eyes, they were not wicked. They were wounded, and suddenly I was moving. "Come with me," I whispered, though I wasn't sure he understood English or me at all. He didn't answer, but he let me take his good arm. He was tall and heavy, with blood loss, and I nearly buckled, dragging him across the side of the chapel. We stumbled into the back cellar door. It creaked open like a secret it didn't want to tell. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of old wood candle wax and communion wine. He collapsed near the crates of unused hymnals. I knelt beside him, trembling. "I'm Eliza," I said, almost to myself. He didn't speak, only winced, as I tore strips from my petticoat and pressed them to his wound. The bullet had gone clean through. My hands shook as I wrapped the cloth around his shoulder fingers, brushing his chest briefly, unintentionally. His skin was warm beneath my palm, his breath shallow. For a moment, our eyes met again and the air changed. He didn't flinch. Nor did I. A silence passed between us that spoke more than words, "I will not harm you." Then from above, footsteps. The cellar door burst open. Eliza rose. Reverend Tobias said. His voice was hard as winter frost. In his hand, a Bible. In his eyes, fire. "What have you done?" I rose to my feet slowly, heart pounding, standing between him and the wounded Apache. "He's hurt," I said. "Bleeding. He's a devil in man's clothing," Tobias spat. "And you've brought sin into the Lord's house." "No," I said. "I brought mercy." He looked at me as if I'd spoken witchcraft. That evening, they gathered in the square. Reverend Tobias Sheriff Mortley, the Green family, the butcher, the tanner, the widow with 4 children. They all came. I stood at the center, hands still stained with blood. Not one person asked why I did it. Eliza Rose Whitfield. Tobias thundered. For treason against your people and the word of God, you are exiled from Broken Mesa. You may take 1 blanket, 1 canteen. Your soul is not welcome here. The crowd murmured their approval. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just said I would do it again. They gave me no horse, no compass, just the desert. So I walked. The moon rose white and hollow above me, casting long shadows across the canyon ridges. I walked until my feet blistered, until the night air chilled the sweat on my neck. I thought about the blood, about the feel of his skin under my hands, about the way he had looked at me like I wasn't something weak or wicked, but something worth saving. By dawn, I had collapsed beneath a scrub juniper tree, arms around my knees. My lips were cracked. My body ached with regret. That's when I heard the hoofbeats. Slow, intentional, a single rider. I looked up, shielding my eyes, and there he was, the Apache, his shoulder wrapped in the same petticoat cloth I had torn, now stiff with blood. He dismounted with practiced ease, though his wound was still raw. He held out a hand. Rough, strong, waiting. I hesitated, then I reached for him, and in that quiet moment beneath the rising sun, something passed between us. Not quite love, not yet, but something that would become it, something that felt like fate. He had no reason to find me, but he did, and I had no reason to believe in miracles. But I took his hand anyway. Chapter 2. What if the one you saved was the only one who could save you back? The desert didn't kill me. It tried. Oh, it tried, but by dawn, I was still breathing, curled beneath a crooked juniper tree like a forgotten offering. The sand was cold against my legs, and the sky had begun its slow bleed from indigo to gold. My lips were cracked. My body ached from the long walk. My thoughts fluttered between regret and something dangerously close to defiance. I hadn't cried. Not yet, but I wanted to. The sun was just cresting the ridge when I heard it. Hoofbeats. Slow, deliberate. Not the wild gallop of a posse or the hurried thunder of a man chased by death. No, these were the footfalls of someone who knew exactly where they were going and why. I sat up, shielding my eyes. My heart clenched tight in my chest. And there he was, the Apache. He sat tall in the saddle, his profile outlined by the morning sun. His shoulder was wrapped in the same bloodied strip of my petticoat. The bandage had darkened overnight, but he held himself upright, steady as stone. He dismounted without a word, the dust rising around his boots. His horse waited obediently behind him. Then he reached out his hand. Rough, brown, calloused. Offered not in pity or dominance, but something else entirely. A gesture, not of rescue, but of recognition. I stared at it, and for a moment I didn't move. I didn't understand why he'd come back. I had nothing left to offer him. The town had cast me out. My hands were stained, my name ruined. I was alone. But he had come anyway. He stood there in the light, impossibly real. The man I had risked everything to save now offering me something I couldn't name. Safety. Hope. Forgiveness. His eyes met mine, and I saw it again, that quiet fire, that question that didn't need words. I took his hand, and the moment our palms met, something passed between us. Not lightning, not magic, something older, something that reached past names, past history, something sacred. His grip was warm, firm. He pulled me gently to my feet, and for a breath we stood there eye to eye. I could feel the heat radiating off his skin, smell the smoke and leather that clung to him. His hair caught the breeze, a ribbon of black across his shoulder. "You came back," I whispered, my voice nearly lost to the wind. He nodded once. "You saved me. I thought you might be dead." He looked toward the horizon. So did I. We didn't speak for a while after that. The silence wasn't awkward. It was holy. I didn't ask his name. Not yet. It felt too soon, too simple. There are some truths that should be earned, not taken. He led me to his horse and helped me up, then climbed behind me, one arm braced to steady us both. I leaned into him carefully, uncertain of where to place my hands. They finally settled over his at the reins. We rode east, the sun behind us, casting long shadows that danced across the canyon walls. I didn't know where he was taking me. I didn't care. All I knew was that I was no longer walking alone. Hours passed. The land changed, becoming more jagged, more alive. We passed a dry riverbed where vultures circled above something rotting. We passed old petroglyphs carved into the stone, their meanings lost to me but sacred to someone. Eventually, we stopped beneath a red rock overhang, a place carved by time and wind into a natural shelter. He dismounted first, then helped me down. His movements were careful, even with his injury. I noticed now how pale had become. Sweat clung to his brow, and his breath came shorter than before. "You're still bleeding," I said. "It's not bad." "That's a lie." He gave me a half smile, brief but real. Then he sat down heavily against the rock wall and closed his eyes for a moment. I knelt beside him, reaching again for the cloth at his shoulder. "Let me help," I said. He didn't stop me. I peeled away the blood-soaked bandage, revealing skin torn but healing. I cleaned the wound as best I could with water from his canteen and tied it again with strips from the inside lining of my dress. As I worked, his eyes stayed on me. "Why did you help me?" he asked softly. I looked up. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe because you looked at me like I wasn't invisible." That answer surprised both of us. When I finished, I leaned back on my heels, my hands red again. "You have a name?" I asked. "Koa," he said. "Koa." I let it settle in my mouth like something sweet. He nodded. "It means brave. That part, I believe." He turned toward me, and there was a flicker of amusement in his expression. It faded quickly. "There are others," he said. "Men like me, hunted, wounded. But we fight for something more than revenge." "Then what?" I asked. "Truth," he said. "Balance." I didn't understand it fully, but I believed him. We sat in silence as the wind whispered through the canyon. The moment stretched, neither of us wanting to speak and break whatever fragile thread had formed between us. Then he reached for my hand, not to pull or lead, but to hold. Our fingers wove together, tentative and slow. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a promise. But it was a beginning. And in that quiet hollow, carved by nature's hand, a girl who'd never been wanted by anyone was finally being chosen. Chapter 3. What do you owe the ones who saved you from yourself? I had traded a name for a man whose name I didn't yet know. And yet there I was, walking into the jaws of a canyon with him, barefoot and blistered, not knowing if he'd vanish by dawn or lead me into something holier than forgiveness. The morning after Koa found me, we crossed the high ridge above Broken Mesa and didn't speak until noon. His shoulder still bled in quiet defiance, wrapped in my torn petticoat like a vow neither of us had spoken. I offered to change the dressing, but he only shook his head, his eyes flickering like embers behind a veil of storm. By late afternoon, the red dust turned gold again, and the world smelled of juniper, sun-baked sage, and the thin iron taste of thirst. We found a trickling spring beneath an overhang, its water slow but clean. Koa bent to drink, then glanced back at Manoa, as if seeking thanks, but as if making sure I still followed. "Why did you come back?" I asked. He didn't answer at first. Then finally he said, Because you stayed. That was all. But it dropped into the silence between us, like a stone into a still lake, and something inside me rippled. I knelt beside him, hands in the spring, and he reached over gently, brushing a burr from my hair. Our eyes met. Not a single word passed. But the wind held its breath. That night, we built a small fire in a shallow arroyo. I used the last of my bread rations, and he laid out smoked meat from a pouch I hadn't seen before. We shared it wordlessly, like an offering placed between two altars. The desert around us grew quiet, no dogs, no church bells, only the distant cry of a night bird. I sat wrapped in my blanket, knees to my chest. Koa took a long breath and pointed to the stars. "Do you know that one?" he asked, his voice low. I shook my head. "Coyote Star," he said. "It follows no path. Some say it was once a man who lied to the moon." I looked at it, bright, flickering just slightly off from the others. "And what happened to him?" Koa gave me a sad smile. "He still wanders, looking for someone to forgive him." We didn't speak again that night, but I slept nearer to him than I had before. The next morning, we reached a narrow pass between two great stone cliffs. Beyond it, the land changed. More mesquite, more life. We moved with care now, and I noticed Koa's posture stiffen. His eyes watched every ridge. "You know this place," I said. He nodded. "Home." By mid-morning, we came upon the Apache camp. It was tucked in a fold of canyon camouflaged by sun-faded cloth and sagebrush. Children paused their play. Women turned slowly. Men stood with spears or rifles, none raised, but none lowered either. The tension in the air was a held breath waiting for a spark. An older man stepped forward, leather-skinned, eyes like molten copper, his presence more mountain than man. Koa bowed his head. "Chaitin," he said. The old man did not look at him. His eyes were on me. "She is why you are bleeding," Chaitin said. Koa did not deny it. "And you bring her here?" Koa stood straighter. "She chose mercy, when her people chose death." A long silence followed. Then Chaitin said, "Words are like rivers. You don't trust them until you see where they lead." He turned and walked away. The crowd parted for him, then slowly folded back in. No one smiled, no one welcomed, but no one stopped us. We were given a small shelter made of reeds and hide. I sat cross-legged inside, heart pounding. Koa changed his own bandage in silence, wincing only slightly. After a while he said, "They do not hate you. Yet." "That's comforting," I murmured. I said, "Yet," he repeated, "you will have to show them something more powerful than speech." I didn't understand what that meant. Not fully, but I would. That evening, I helped an old woman gather water from the stream. She didn't speak English and I didn't speak Chiricahua, but she handed me the smaller pot, and when I stumbled, she caught my elbow. That was all. Later, a girl no older than 10 brought me a strip of jerky without meeting my eye. When night fell, a drumbeat started. Soft, slow. A circle gathered near the fire. Faces illuminated one moment, shadowed the next. Koa didn't speak. He only sat beside me and passed me a bowl of something sweet and bitter. I drank. It tasted like bark and smoke. Then from the far edge of the circle, a man stepped forward. His face was scarred across one side as if clawed by fate itself. He pointed to me. "She will dance," he said. My stomach dropped. Koa stood. "She is tired. She is alive." The man said, "Let her show she wants to be." The circle murmured. I rose. My legs trembled, but I stepped into the firelight. I didn't know the steps. I didn't know the rhythm. So I closed my eyes and moved anyway. Not to be right, not to be good, but to be. When I finished, no one clapped. But the silence had changed. It was not cold now. It listened. I sat back down beside Koa. He said nothing, but his hand brushed mine, and I let it stay. The trial was not over. I knew that. But the first stone had been placed, and something in me, tired, exiled, unloved, had begun to root. And somewhere in the distance past the canyon's bend, something else was coming. Not storm, not soldier, something far more dangerous. Memory. Chapter 4. What if the enemy was the first to whisper my name? Like a prayer. We rode for hours in silence, the heat rising in waves from the canyon floor, blurring the distant red buttes like something half-remembered. He let me ride behind him, my arms loosely around his waist, the steady rhythm of the horse beneath us, hypnotic. Every now and then I felt the tension in his back when the trail narrowed or a hawk's shadow passed overhead. But he said nothing, and neither did I. We came to a place where the cliff walls opened wide like the desert itself had exhaled. A quiet clearing ringed by old cottonwoods and flat rocks warmed by the fading sun. The wind here was gentler, scented with creosote and dry sage. There was a small fire already built in the center. Someone had been expecting us. A handful of his people stood nearby. They watched me the way thunderheads watch the plains, still heavy and full of something I couldn't name. A child peeked from behind his mother's shawl. An old man carved something into bone with fingers that trembled but never missed. I dismounted slowly, not sure whether to look up or keep my eyes down. The Apache warrior, he hadn't told me his name yet, stood beside me, his wounded arm hanging stiffly at his side. "This is Eliza," he said, his voice low but clear. "She gave me mercy when none else would." No one moved. No one smiled. But no one stopped him either. They let us be. Later, as the sky bled into indigo, he took me to the fire. We sat near it, the flames casting long shadows that danced like spirits. The canyon walls turned gold, then bronze, then ash. I must have just stared at the fire too long because he spoke softly. "You are not like them." I turned, startled. "Like who?" "Those who see only the outside." Skin named silence. His eyes didn't leave the fire. "You see, inside." I wanted to say something clever, something that would explain why I'd risked everything for him. But all I managed was, "I don't know what I'm doing." His lips twitched, half amusement, half sorrow. "Good. That means your soul is still deciding." We sat like that a long time, the fire crackling, our knees almost touching. He handed me a strip of dried meat wrapped in cloth. I took it with both hands, more aware of his gesture than the food. Then he reached into his coat and drew out something small, a carved raven of turquoise worn at the edges, strung on a leather cord. "This is my family's," he said. "My mother gave it to me before I was taken to war. She said the raven knows the way home." He held it out. "I didn't move at first. I can't take that. It's sacred." He shook his head. "I'm not giving it. I'm sharing it." Slowly I reached out and closed my fingers around the charm, feeling the smooth coolness of the stone and the warmth of his palm beneath it. Our hands lingered. His fingers brushed mine, lightly like the memory of a touch, and in that quiet space, something shifted. I looked up, and for the first time, I saw him, not as an outlaw or a wounded man or even a stranger, but as a mirror of my own longing. Someone cast out by what should have loved him. Someone walking the same road I'd stumbled into. "What's your name?" I asked, barely louder than the fire's whisper. He hesitated, then said, "Taza." "Taza," I repeated. It felt ancient and soft and strong all at once, like a river that never dried. He nodded, then touched his chest. "And you, Eliza," I said. And when I spoke, something tightened in my throat, if saying my name in his presence made it real again, but different, like it belonged to someone I hadn't yet become. A hush settled between us. Then came the sound, light but distinct, a twig snapping near the outer trees. Taza rose instantly, his body tense, scanning the shadows. I stood too, heart pounding. "What is it?" "Not sure," he said, stepping in front of me. "Stay close." From the dark edge of the camp, a shape emerged. A man, white-skinned, riding a piebald horse. He wore a preacher's collar. Reverend Tobias. He looked as if he'd walked from a grave dust-covered eyes, burning with fevered righteousness. Behind him, a few townsmen rode slowly forward, rifles visible. My breath caught. How did they find us, I think? Taza murmured. They never stopped following. The tribe's people stirred, some reaching for weapons, others shielding children. But no one made the first move. Not yet. Reverend Tobias raised his voice. Eliza Rose Whitfield, I gave you a chance to repent. Now I come to bring you home, to cleanse your soul with fire if I must. Taza moved closer to me, his hand brushing my arm in silent warning. You don't have to go, he said. I know, I whispered, but I stepped forward anyway. Not to surrender, but to stand. I'm already home, I called out, and I don't need saving. The wind caught my hair and dress like wings. For a moment, even the fire leaned my way. Tobias' face twisted in disbelief like he'd seen a ghost wear courage. Taza stood behind me solid and quiet, and the raven talisman around my neck pulsed against my chest, cool, steady, eternal. And though I knew the night might end in fire or blood or exile once again, I wasn't afraid. Because for the first time, I was exactly where I chose to be. With a man who saw me. A people who waited without demand. A name I no longer had to whisper to believe. And a future I would fight for, with open eyes, open hands, and a heart that had stopped asking permission. Chapter 5. What if the fire that warmed me was the same one that would burn everything I loved? The first night after I chose to stay was warm with firelight and cold with silence. I sat close to the dancing flames in the canyon camp, my blue calico dress collecting the red glow like it belonged there. My hands trembled slightly, though I kept them wrapped tightly around a chipped tin cup of stew I could hardly taste. Around us, the Apache villagers moved in cautious rhythm. Some watched me openly, others not at all, but all were aware of me. The girl who stood before a rifle-bearing preacher and said no. He sat beside me again, Chaska. His arm was still bound in the cloth I had soaked with his blood days before. His shoulder brushed mine occasionally, and each time it felt like lightning through bone. But we said little. The words were too tender, too dangerous in the open air. Still, I felt him speaking to me in the spaces between flames and footsteps. Do you regret it? He asked at last, his voice low and rough like cedar smoke. I stared into the fire. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. Not far from us, a group of elders sat in a loose circle, their voices soft, their gazes firm. A few settlers who had remained after the confrontation lingered in the distance uneasily, clutching satchels and murmuring to one another. I didn't belong with either circle, not fully, and yet both had turned to look at me. I was becoming something else, a bridge or a betrayal. Later, as the stars bloomed across the canyon sky, a drum began. It was soft at first, like a heartbeat too cautious to claim its rhythm. Then came the flute mournful rising, and the camp stirred. I hadn't expected a dance, not tonight, not after everything, but when Chaska stood and extended his hand, I took it. He didn't lead me into the center like some bold statement. He guided me quietly to the edge where the flickering shadows let us half belong. Others danced, a weaving of limbs and light of stories told through motion, but our steps were gentle, uncertain. He placed a hand near the small of my back, not quite touching. I breathed in his closeness, smelled earth and ash, and something sweet I couldn't name. His eyes searched mine. They think you are foolish, he said. They're not wrong, I whispered, voice breaking. And still you stayed. I couldn't run from you. The truth hung between us, naked, dangerous. I saw it in the way his mouth almost curved, in the way he stepped closer but didn't pull me in. Our foreheads nearly touched, and I could have sworn the canyon held its breath. Then someone called my name. Eliza. A boy ran through the firelight, dust-covered, panting. A messenger from the town, younger brother of the chapel boy who had once slipped me hymns folded like secrets. He thrust something into my hands, a letter. My name written on it in a trembling, familiar hand. My father's. Chaska stepped back as I unfolded the paper, the drumbeat vanishing from my ears. The letter was short, a few lines, each one etched with grief and shame and fear. Daughter, you have chosen them. Your name no longer belongs to me. Do not return. Father. The edges of the paper shook, or maybe it was just me. I couldn't feel my hands anymore, couldn't feel the warmth of the fire that moments ago had held me. Chaska reached toward me uncertain. I didn't look at him. I walked, out of the firelight, into the dark. The canyon was vast and silvered under the moon. I knelt beside the juniper tree where we had once hidden, pressing the letter to my chest, as though it could stab or save me. How could a man who once taught me to ride bareback to draw maps in the dirt to believe in heaven? How could he cut me off like this? The wind whispered across the canyon walls. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just sat there, until I heard him again, Chaska behind me. I don't want to cost you your name, he said gently. I turned. My face must have been a ruin of tears and firelight. You didn't, I said. He gave it away. A silence stretched between us, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the sound of something breaking open. He knelt beside me then, not to rescue, not to promise anything, just to be there. I don't know who I am anymore, I admitted. You're the one who stayed. I nodded slowly, and somewhere behind us, the drum began again. But this time, it didn't sound like judgment. It sounded like a second chance. Some stories linger long after the fire dies and the dust settles. This one, told through the eyes of a young woman with a heart full of longing and courage, wasn't just about the West. It was about choosing love when judgment stares you down. About standing still when everything inside you wants to run. About risking reputation, even life, for something you know is right, even when it's complicated, uncertain, and unwelcomed by others. For those of us who've spent years carrying invisible burdens, duty to family, the pressure to conform, the ache of a past love, we recognize ourselves in her silence, her defiance, her reaching hand. This story reminds us that real change, personal, emotional, cultural, never comes easy. It's messy. It's misunderstood. It might get you cast out of the crowd you once called your own, but it can also awaken something deeper, a truth you didn't know you were waiting for. If you've ever made a choice that others questioned, but your heart insisted on. If you've ever stood in front of a crowd and dared to speak, Love Protect This story was for you. It's not just the frontier landscape that feels distant now. It's the willingness to be that brave in our modern lives. But maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe the courage to rewrite the ending isn't buried in history. Maybe it's right where you are right now. You've just heard one powerful story, but many more remain untold. Click to discover more raw, gripping, deeply human tales from the Wild West.